And I see we got a good amount of people in here. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to them for their presentation on advanced snapshotting in Einstein Analytics.
Great, thanks everybody so much for joining. Happy Saturday. We're here in Indianapolis and it's 4:20, so that's a good time for DataDreamin. I'll go ahead and dive in with very quick intros, lots to cover, but I'm Robert Anderson. I'm the Director of Salesforce Delivery for Spring ML. Work with a really great team here, including Gene. I'll let him introduce himself quickly.
Yeah, I'm Gene James. I'm a analytics consultant here at Spring ML. Yeah, happy to be on the team with Robert.
We're both proud analytics champions, if you want to go look up what that means, but great program that Salesforce puts on for that. So a quick intro, talk about what we're going to be going over today. First, we'll do a little intro on snapshots, kind of when do you need snapshots, what are they, data grain kind of stuff. Then we'll have two demos. First, we'll have one based loosely on the Snapshot Analytics out of the box app in Einstein Analytics, and then a quick use case on how you can build on top of that. We'll go into some tips and tricks and things to kind of look out for, and then we'll go into our second use case, which is the one we probably see most often, but is a bit more complicated, so we'll save it towards the end and not overwhelm people, and that's pipeline or company trending, it's called. So with that, I'll jump into a quick intro of what is a snapshot. So basically, it is a point-in-time copy in Salesforce of your full source data in Einstein Analytics. So every time you run your Einstein Analytics data flow, a copy of the data is appended with a new snapshot date. So if you see over here on the left, we have a example 4-row source data set, and then on the right, we have our snapshot data set. If we ran the data flow on January 1st, we'd get all 4 rows with a snapshot date of January 1st. If we ran it again on January 2nd, we'd have all the data again with the date of January 2nd. If we ran it again and so on, this could be daily, weekly, monthly, but we'd have the snapshot date and then all of the data. And that's really the critical piece for the power that we have here. What these snapshots and the snapshot data allows you to do is capture changes that aren't otherwise saved. If you're at January 3rd and the data looked one way on January 2nd, certain dates were set certain ways or certain dimension values or whatever. If that data has changed, there's no way to know what the data looked like on January 2nd without snapshots. But with those snapshots, you can go back in time. I could select the snapshot date of January 1st or 2nd and see all of the data and analyze it any way that I want. And then furthermore, I could trend and analyze those changes over time, looking at kind of high level trends or even doing some more complex things like comparing line level of what records looked like at different dates. And we'll talk about that later. Really quick, again, what we're talking about here is detail level snapshots where you have all of your source data in each snapshot, all of the rows for each date. The pro here is that it's super highly flexible. Anything you want to drill into, you have the ability to do that. The obvious con is that you have a super high data volume. Before columnar data storage and cloud-based analytics solutions, this was pretty much a no-go because rows were expensive, but now Einstein does a great job of handling it. If you have an EA Plus license, you can store up to 10 billion rows. So unless your source data is in the millions or tens of millions, you can store quite a number of snapshots and have all of the detail. Really quick, if you're familiar with more traditional enterprise data warehousing, there's the idea of snapshots that are really at a summary level where it's really just aggregates stored for each day. So for here in our example, for each day, we maybe just have a total on each date, and each day just has one row. So for January, we've got some kind of total for that day. The pro here is that instead of lots of rows for each snapshot, you have one or maybe a handful and way lower data volume, but then you lose the detail. You can't drill in on detail that you're not tracking. You just have those totals or aggregated kind of views. Part of this slide didn't load. All right. Sorry, weird technical glitch. We'll carry on. So a few times where you don't need snapshots really quick. If you capture every change in your data, this gets tricky and we won't really get into it. But if you have everything that's changed about your data tracked in something like change data capture, or for example here an opportunity stage history, you can basically go back and recreate snapshots. So if here, for example, and this is kind of an old screenshot, but you've got changes that happened in opportunity stages a couple things that happened in 2012 and then 2015. If you wanted to know what it looked like somewhere in 2013, you'd basically have to go to this most recent row from 2012, and you could kind of extrapolate what your data looked like. So if you have that level of change capturing, you can get around actual snapshots, or it looks like my screenshot didn't load, but really if the current data is all that you need, if kind of the final state of the data and what it looks like right now is what you need, and you need to trend based on that, then you don't really need snapshots. And the example here is looking at closed won opportunities by month. If all you need to do is look back at things that have already closed and kind of gotten to their final state of with a closed won date as of now, then you don't need snapshots. You just need to know what the data looks like now. To help illustrate some of this, we've got our 2 use cases today. First, Gene will walk us through a use case for active user license trending. So the example here is pretending we're a software as a service company, maybe like Salesforce, selling product licenses or seats. And let's say that that's not necessarily tracked over time, and you want to look day over day or month over month or week over week, how many licenses you had by state, by product, by all sorts of things. Snapshots are really helpful there. And then the more advanced use case that we'll get into is pipeline trending, or people often call it a waterfall because this is a waterfall chart. And this is used often by sales teams that want to track their opportunity pipeline and how that's changed between 2 dates, from a start date to an end date, the types of ways that things have changed. The thing that's really special about this is it does comparisons between those dates at the opportunity level, and does some really cool detailed analysis. This actually comes with the Sales Analytics app. It's kind of a baseline, but oftentimes needs customized and needs kind of custom snapshotting, and we'll get into that in a bit. But for now, I will pass it off to Gene for a quick demo on the Snapshot Analytics app and our first use case. So let me stop sharing and pass it to Gene.
Okay, so now that you guys kind of know a little bit more about snapshots and how and when to use them, our first use case, like Robert mentioned, is we want to be able to track and look at our licenses and how they're being activated or deactivated over time at the account level. So our accounts have certain amount of licenses that they're utilizing, and we just want to be able to track that within a dashboard. So to start off, we're in Analytics Studio, and to build out the out-of-the-box Snapshot Analytics app template, on our top right, we can go ahead and click Create Our App, and here's where we can search for our Snapshot Analytics app. And then we'll click Continue. This just kind of gives like a basic overview, some information, what the dashboard's going to end up looking like. So go ahead and click Continue, create a brand new app. And here is where we have the option to choose data from our Salesforce objects or from an existing data set. And right now, we are pushing an external data set into Einstein in order to capture our license activity. So we're going to go ahead and select an existing data set. And here is where we can select the data set. And here's where we can select dimensions or measures, dimensions and measures. This is just some basic starting points for the dimensions and measures that we're going to compare by. This can be adjusted in the dashboard and in the data set as you go on. So here we're going to go ahead and select industry, and we'll do account tier and support level. And then for our measures, we can do our active users, active licenses, annual revenue. Looks good. Next. And here's where we select our retention. And so here we can select 30 days, 60 days, 120 days. And what this does is it essentially lets us say, okay, once a snapshot gets to be older than 30 days as of the current date, we're going to go ahead and drop that off of our data set. So we're going to go ahead and select 60. Looks good. Next, we name our app and we click create. And what that does is it creates the out-of-the-box app. It creates 2 items. It creates a dashboard and a snapshot data set, and it also pushes a data flow. And so let's go ahead and hop over to the data manager and take a look at that data flow. So here we have our DataDreamin Snapshot app data flow, and it consists of essentially 2 main pieces. First, where we're going to extract our existing snapshot, and second, where we're going to extract our data set. So like I said, let's say we push that data set into Einstein. This is where we're going to push the most recent data set into our data manager and pull it into the data flow. And then we're going to pull our existing snapshot, and eventually we're going to append and kind of stack the most recent data on top of our previous snapshot. So like what Robert was saying with the January 1st, January 2nd, and 3rd, this is where we start to stack that on top of each other. One thing I want to point out here is where we have this remove data flag. And what this allows us to do is essentially run the snapshot multiple times a day, and it's going to take the latest data for that day. And so this gives us the option to, say, run it at like morning, noon, evening for a day. If we want to capture, or if something changes that we need to kind of reiterate and replace, we can take away the current snapshot for the current day and replace it with the most recent data. And then after the append, here's where we have our snapshot filter flag. And this is where it pulls in that retention logic. So here's where we're basically saying that if a snapshot is older than 60 days, we're going to filter it out of the data set. And this is where we can get kind of creative and complex with our retention. So let's say we want to look at the previous 2 weeks, and then from that point on, we only want to look at the end of the week. So here's where we can kind of say we'll keep everything within the 14 days, and then specify, you know, a certain date or a certain iteration after that. And then once this is all computed and done, we push the data set into Einstein. And so let's go ahead and hop in and look at our data set. So here we have our app. Like I said, it creates 2 out-of-the-box items, our snapshot trend dashboard and our snapshot data set. This is the data set that we took and we started snapshotting. And so let's go ahead and look at the snapshot that we have here. And so this is just going to push our basic lens, our count of rows with no groupings. Let's go ahead and check our snapshot date, year, month, day. And this is just going to show, you know, which days and how many rows that we've collected on each of the snapshot dates, each of the date the snapshot was run. And let's say we also want to look at it by industry. So we want to look at how our industry is changing per snapshot date. And here's where we can select our active licenses. And so now we have kind of a quick little insight into how our industries are changing per snapshot date over time. So this is a good starting point. This is the data set. Now let's see how it fuels our out-of-the-box dashboard. So our snapshot trending dashboard was created when the app was created and ran. Here's where we have those dimensions that were selected, our metrics here that we selected when we pre-built the app. And then here it just shows a trend based off of the snapshot date and how everything changes over time. So here, if we change it to, again, our active licenses, we can see how it changes over time based off of our data grouping for our state. If we change this to our support level, we can see that the stacks change, and we can see how our support levels and our totals change over time. And then on the left side here, we have the option to actually compare snapshots. So if we wanted to look at the 14th, let's say September 14th versus September 9th, we have some comparisons for our average of our active users, active licenses, and our sum. So we can see that from the 9th to the 14th, our total sum of active licenses increased by 9% since the 9th. And then down below, we just have a details table to kind of dig into our data a little bit more over time. And so this is the out-of-the-box dashboard that is created when you run the Snapshot Analytics app. So this gives us a good starting point, but we want to look at it a little bit more by location, by different dimensions, and we want to see exactly where our licenses are being activated and deactivated. And so that's where we've created an active license trending dashboard. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And here you can see we still have our filtering up top. We have our map where we can see where our licenses are currently active. We can see our total current active licenses based off of the current date. We can see our trend over time of our total license count. And then down below that, we have our trend based off of the previous day. So for example, on the 6th, we gained almost 700,000 active licenses versus the 5th. Although on the 7th, we dropped almost 500,000 active licenses. So let's say we kind of want to dig in a little bit more on, where or why we're losing our licenses. We can look at our categorical breakdown and see, okay, what's changing based off of a current date if we wanted to go back in time. So for example, on the 6th, we had our most licenses. We want to go back and view what our data looked like on that date. So here we have our snapshot date set to September 8th. And let's go ahead and select California as our example. So California, if we go ahead and select that, it's going to facet the trend for California, the current active licenses as of today's date, and the categorical breakdown for California itself. Now we know where we're at on the 8th. Let's compare it to, like we said, what we wanted to see on the 6th and see where we had most of our numbers. Now this stuff, because it holds the trend and our current active licenses, that's going to stick no matter what snapshot date we choose. But our map and our categorical breakdown are going to change based off the date that we select. So now we can see, okay, what did our industries look like on the 6th? What did our utilization categories, our utilization buckets look like on the 6th, our support level? And so this just kind of gives us a better look at, where exactly our numbers looked at, or where exactly our numbers looked at what time historically based off of our snapshot data set. And again, if we wanted to look at specifically our finance industry, it's going to change, our utilization, support level, current active licenses. It's going to facet so we can kind of just keep digging in deeper and deeper into our data and look at historical trends and historical dates and basically just look at our snapshots of the data. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Robert to kind of hop back into a little bit more tips and tricks and our second use case.
Great, thanks, Gino. Let me share. All right, so let me share a couple tips and tricks before we get into our crazy pipeline trend use case. So the first one is start early and in production. You don't really have data in your snapshot data set until you start running your snapshot data flow. If you wait 2 weeks, 2 months to run, then your first snapshot date is going to be 2 weeks or 2 months from now. So get going as soon as you can. But with that said, it's good to plan carefully ahead of time what you need to have in your source data set. Make a spreadsheet, really plan it out, because we've seen cases where halfway through the project, we realized, oh shoot, we need to add another field, and suddenly our snapshot data set before the date we added that field isn't all that useful. You can do some things to kind of backfill, but it's not totally accurate. So plan carefully and realize that kind of once the snapshot's taken, it's that way. A couple things around retention logic Dean already talked about for what snapshots to keep. These are controlled by the data flow. The remove data flag allows you to remove existing snapshots for the current day and kind of keep updating the current day snapshot with the most recent data. And then the filter flag towards the end of the data flow allows you to control how long to keep snapshots. And really the aim here is to balance the volume of your source data versus the number of snapshots to keep. You have 10 billion rows, like I said before, row limit with Einstein Analytics Plus. So even if you have tens of millions of records, you can keep up to a couple years daily and still be under that limit. If you only have Einstein Analytics growth, you only have 100 million. So you might have to plan a little bit more there, but just try to do some math. But then especially as you're doing that math, think about how your source data volume might increase over time. If your business is growing, if you're acquiring new companies and suddenly your source data is going to double or triple, then try to keep that in mind. And then for larger volumes, with that remove data flag or the snapshot filter flag, you can take kind of a mixed approach. For a recent project, we did something like keeping snapshots daily for 60 days back, and then past 60 days, keeping weekly for 2 years. So maybe after 60 days, you really only need to compare week over week. So you can do that kind of logic with SACWL expressions for your compute flag, or for your flags for the filtering. A couple quick notes around scheduling your snapshot data flow. Obviously, you need to schedule it to run after your source data flow finishes. The timing of that can be tricky because you can't necessarily tell it to run contingently. Say once this data set's updated, run. You just have to get the timing right. So plan it out in a spreadsheet, figure it out, but then also keep track of it, since data flow durations can change over time. Anybody in Einstein Analytics has probably seen data flow runs start to queue up on each other and start to fail because there's too many things waiting to run. So just keep track of that probably for weeks or months after you start doing this. And one note, if you only run once per day because it takes long enough to run, or you really only need it updated once, Be careful that your snapshot date doesn't get pushed to tomorrow. If you're, I believe Einstein Analytics gets stuck on GMT, or that might be set by org with time zones. But if you're at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Savings Time, that's actually midnight. So we've seen cases where today is September 19th, we run our data flow at 5 p.m., but then actually it shows up with the date of September 20th. So if you want September 19th to mean end of the day on September 19th, then take that into account. One other thing that's really helpful is adding something like an is current or is most recent snapshot field. This allows you to reliably filter to your most recent data. For example, if you do something to filter your snapshot date to current day, and it's the beginning of the day and your snapshot data flow hasn't run yet, you won't get any data because there is no data for current data or for current day. You can get around this by having that is most recent snapshot field to just always say that instead of saying today. So it might have to take tomorrow until the data flow runs. And then the last tip for dimension values, think about whether you care what the values are as of the snapshot date or currently. A common example for this is a sales rep's region for like an opportunity owner sales rep. For our example here, we're snapshotting just one row for one opportunity. We've got a snapshot in January where the sales rep is in the West. Let's say we run it again just once in February, they're still in the West, but in March, they switch to the East. If we're looking at trending, do we want to consider that they were kind of East for the whole year, or do we want to look at what it was as of the snapshot date? If you're looking at trends per region or something, you might want to say all of these are now considered East. So what you can do is add an augment at the end of the snapshot data flow to pull in the current dimension values, and then you'd have something like current.salesRep region where you still store the as of the snapshot date value, but then you also have a field that has the current value, and that can be very valuable. All right, now that we've inducted you into the basics, let's dig into probably the use case that I see most commonly, and I might confuse all of you, and I apologize, but I think this is worthwhile because it comes up so often, and that is the pipeline trending dashboard that comes with the Sales Analytics app. What this does is compares your company's pipeline, or that's all of your opportunities, kind of potential sales, within Sales Cloud from a start date to an end date, and then looks at how each opportunity has changed between those two dates, whether they are new, whether they've increased, been won, lost, have their dates moved in or out, etc. This actually uses the stage history object that I showed before, and it sort of recreates those historical snapshots, but we often see cases where you need to look at things at maybe the opportunity product level. We've actually done this at the opportunity product revenue schedule level for revenue recognition reasons. And this can be replaced and kind of recreated using custom snapshots. But I can't show you that example, but you can see the Sales Analytics app. So we'll use that as our starting point and something you could dig into yourself. So for that, let's go to Analytics Studio. You would go to create app and then create your Sales Analytics app. But for time, I'll just jump right into this company trending dashboard that you get out of the box in the Sales Analytics app. So what this allows you to do is set your start and end date for the pipeline that you're comparing. Let's go to 5 quarters ago to 3 quarters ago. And then what you can see here is that at the beginning, at 5 quarters ago, we had almost 400K of pipeline. And then at 3 quarters ago, we had 6.5 million. A certain amount of that was new opportunities. Some of those were reopened. Some of those were opportunities that expanded or had their dates moved in. But the cool thing of what this is doing, and I'll jump back to slides to kind of help walk through this logic. This is actually comparing at the opportunity level to calculate these kind of, since it's a waterfall, these different buckets. So for each opportunity, was it new? Did its amount change? Did its amount decrease? So to look at that logic, let's go back to our slides here.
You have about 4 minutes left.
Great. All right, so I'll make this quick. So what this does is it filters to the start and the end date. Here, 5 to 3 quarters ago, it actually joins those snapshot dates on the opportunity ID, And then for each opportunity ID, it calculates its bucket of how it changed, whether it was new, moved in, moved out, expanded, and then it aggregates those totals up to the bucket level. So if you want to customize this pipeline trending dashboard, but you can't use the out of the box, refer back to this as kind of a starting point, and then you can write your own SACL to do those calculations. Very quickly, some out of the box things. If you need to change the grain of your data, recipes or the new data prep tool can actually do groupings and change your data grain. And then if you have people using classic Salesforce reports, there's an old function of trending the output of those reports within an Einstein Analytics data set. So other things to look at there. But with that, I will end for now and leave it for questions. Did we have anything
Looks
so
like
far?
you have 2 questions. The first
Great.
question is, how do you deal with issues like if a data flow fails or if someone derps and accidentally runs it manually by mistake?
So the beauty of the remove data filter logic is that you can always run for the, if it fails in a current day, you can always just run it again. And what it out of the box does is it just keeps the most recent snapshot for the current day. If somebody derps and runs it accidentally, like some of this, like if you're tracking opportunities, those are changing all day. You've just got to kind of know that like it's arbitrarily capturing what it looked like at 5 p.m. for the final snapshot of the day. It also stores the timestamp if you want to get into it, but you do need to be careful. If somebody derps and messes up the retention logic and it wipes all of your snapshot data, whoops, it's gone. So be careful. You can run one-off data flows to actually just make a full copy and kind of backup of your data set. That might not be a bad idea to do that every once in a while, just to be careful, unless you have high volume and don't want that many rows hitting your limit. But you could make backups just to be careful.
Awesome. And we have one more question. And just a reminder to everyone, when they leave the Zoom meeting, you're going to get a survey that'll pop up in your web browser. If you could please take the survey, that'll help out the organizers for the next event. But can you give some examples of how to set up those queries to control how often snapshots are retained? My use case, I need it once a week for the past year, then only monthly after that.
And real quick, somebody replied on the first question, you can actually restore data sets. So if somebody derps and deletes all your data, you might be able to go into the advanced settings and restore. So thanks to the person who helped with that. But then for how to come up with the logic for which snapshots to keep, I think what we've done, Gene, is you like maybe take a date data set that has all dates and then write a SACL query to kind of have the logic of true or false, do we keep this date? And then come up with whatever that kind of SACL case statement usually is to say, if it's a week ago and Wednesday, keep it. If it's a week ago and Thursday, don't keep it, and that kind of thing. But yeah, test it in a SACL lens and kind of play with what the logic is before you do it in the data flow, and test it first. Make a copy of your data flow, don't overwrite your target data set, test it in a differently named target data set, and then make sure you're not dropping what you did something incorrectly, and then move it to kind of, but you have to be careful with change control and kind of come up with the process there. Great
and
questions.
We are right at time, so this is a good point to end. Thank you so much, Robert and Gene.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.